Hello and welcome to our Tribe Talks podcast. This is the Rising Star edit, and today we're talking about AI in advertising execution. My name's Emily Lau, and I am a senior performance media manager here at Lane Media in Scotland, and I work on different client accounts, including e-commerce to charities, but really focusing on that performance element across different paid channels like Meta, TikTok, Pinterest, and Google. And I'm joined today by my talented colleague Emily Fraser, who works on the creative side of Lane. Emily, would you mind sharing with our listeners your role and what you do at the Lane?
Yeah, of course. So, yes, I'm another Emily, and I'm one of the design directors at Lane. So, I've been with the agency for about 3 years, and my role is quite mixed. I manage some of the designers, and we deliver on all sorts of creative outputs. So, from advertising to graphic design, branding, motion graphics, video editing, some content creation. So, we do a whole bunch of stuff. We're always busy and kept on our toes.
Lovely. And I've asked Emily to join this AI conversation with me today just because AI is, we're seeing it straddle both teams now. It's everything that we are doing in performance media is all tied back to creative. And so having a little insight on how the creative team are tackling AI would be a very interesting discussion. So let's get into it. So, as a little bit of a background in how AI is influencing performance media and advertising today, with our performance media channels like Facebook, Google, it's relying a lot on automatic bidding, in your automatic targeting, and of course, dynamic creative optimizations. So, these platforms are applying their own creative on top of your creative. So implementing text optimizations or adding on an overlay on top of your image. So these are all brand new things that are AI generated in terms of what we can see on platform for performance media. But I wondered, Emily, if you can, from your perspective, how is AI being used in advertising today from a creative standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen lots of interesting applications of AI within creative. So one of the examples that I think I've seen the most is when it comes to doing kind of pitch work. So that obviously can take up a lot of studio time doing pitch work that might not necessarily lead to actual kind of billable work for us. So if we can minimize the amount of hours that we spend actually outputting, slide decks and that sort of thing, then that's where AI can really play an integral role to us making sure that we're not sort of having to rely on the internal team too much to do this pitch work. So we obviously want to be focused on our clients and making sure that we are kind of delivering really, really amazing creative for them. And the pitch work, obviously we need that for new business, but if we can kind of outsource some of the early ideation for that, that's where I think AI can be used. And from what I've heard kind of anecdotally in the industry and from what I've read, that seems to be the most kind of prevalent use case. I have also seen that a few kind of creative awards, they have AI specific awards for that. So I think that's really interesting as well because it gives it a dedicated space for awards as well, rather than kind of shoehorning it into the existing awards. And I think it's interesting to have that differentiation so that you're not kind of getting penalized if you're not using AI, for example, when it comes to
Yeah.
having recognition in that way. So that's kind of how I've seen it being used so far. But it'll probably change in the next 6 months completely.
Yeah. And have you seen that new Coca-Cola advert for Christmas? Obviously, at this time of recording, it's November, start of November, so we're gearing
Mhm.
up for that Christmas time. We're seeing a lot of ads out in the open at the minute. We've got the John Lewis advert out, but one thing that we've heard about in the news is that Coca-Cola advert where
Mhm.
they are using a fully AI generated video. And it's the same, they did that last year as well and got a lot
Mhm.
of backlash for that. What is your opinions on that of a company using a fully AI generated piece of content for an ad?
Well, I can't say I'm a fan of it for a number of reasons. First of all, Coca-Cola is a humongous company. They have budget for to commission creative teams. So I don't know why they would have decided to have done that other than just to be appearing to be kind of jumping on the AI bandwagon, I would say. I also think I've watched it and it's not so much about the AI that I don't like, it's the story or the concept for it is boring. And it didn't make me feel anything when I watched that. Whereas if I compare that to the John Lewis advert that's been released, which obviously has been completely filmed from scratch and has a really strong concept, that just resonates with me a lot more than anything that's been created with AI that just has kind of animals. I think that's the main theme is just
Mhm.
animals waiting for the Coca-Cola truck to arrive and then a very creepy looking Santa um, that I think might haunt me in my dreams. So I just think it lacks the emotional resonance that you get from something that has been more human led.
Yeah, and that's the thing that we always come back to is you can use AI, but it needs to have that human counterpart with it as well. But do you think that other companies will start following the likes of Coca-Cola, where it might not be fully AI generated, but using some of that AI within their video for an ad?
I could see that happening, definitely, but I think it kind of comes down to, well, I think most companies will end up having some sort of kind of AI ethics policy that they'll be looking to adhere to.
Hmm.
So, for example, some of our kind of charity clients are less keen to use it because they have concerns about the ethical side of using it, whereas other businesses may not have as strict kind of guidance on that and maybe want to explore how we can explore more concepts using AI. So I definitely can see more people doing it, especially with a company as huge as Coca-Cola truly embracing it, then I think obviously that's going to inspire more people to look into it. But I'd imagine the AI tool that they have used for that was very expensive and probably they had to tweak quite a lot. So I know it's obviously they've managed to do it without as many creatives as you would if you weren't using AI, but I still imagine there was quite a lot of creatives involved with tweaking the AI results because
Hmm.
from my experience with AI, it can create some amazing imagery, but most of the time you do need to tweak it. And if you want to make little small changes to a piece of creative, half the time it doesn't really know what those little changes are. It isn't able to understand the nuances of a slight tweak to creative, whereas a human can absolutely do that. So I think that's kind of, well, that's where I still see a human creative having a very important part of the process because you still need to be able to curate the best imagery. Like if we look at Midjourney, for example, you can create loads and loads of images on there, and some will look pretty cool in isolation, but without any kind of depth or any kind of curation, then you're just looking at a bunch of images that look kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that our platforms in performance media do is add on these extra bit of text on top of images, like I mentioned at the start, or they are now being able to turn like a single image into a fully generated video, which is great when creative teams don't have enough resources or there's not enough time to create all of these different ads. And so this is one thing that we're seeing, especially on TikTok. TikTok has this tool called Symphony where you can create loads of different videos just using an image, or you can even have an avatar, fully AI generated avatar, talking about your product and reviewing your product, which again plays into that ethical issue of this person isn't real. They haven't actually bought the product. They don't they don't know how it behaves, and so it's an interesting minefield that we're stepping into today. And I wonder, Emily, do you see ads in your own personal time that have an AI sticker on it? I know that on TikTok you need to announce when something's been AI generated. Are you starting to see that infiltrate your feed at all?
Like, I am seeing that a little bit. I have to say, I kind of automatically want to flip on to the next thing because I think it
Mm,
lacks a bit of authenticity, and I think that's a concern for anything that's kind of generated like that. Because of course, if an avatar is AI generated by a company, of course it's going to love the product. It's not going to look at it in any kind of critical way. But I guess arguably you could say if an influencer is being paid to kind of critique a product, then they are also financially motivated to saying something positive. So I guess there's always been that kind of issue with, is it authentic? However, I would say for most people, if it's an actual person delivering it, it's going to feel more authentic, even if they have been paid to say it.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. We That's something that we tell our clients quite a lot, is that especially on a platform like TikTok, you need to be authentic, you need to be human,
mhm,
and you need to really sell in that human aspect, and relatability for your video. Because ultimately, it is an entertainment channel. People want to be entertained by real people rather than seeing or second guessing if something's been AI generated or not.
yeah, and it does have that kind of
Yeah.
uncanny valley feel to it as
Yes.
well,
Yeah.
like the Santa Claus, which I've read a few people who have kind of done little reviews of the Coca-Cola advert, and they all find the Santa a little bit creepy. I don't think anyone's warming to
Yeah.
him.
Although it is getting better,
Mm.
you'll see like that the test that people do with Will Smith eating the spaghetti,
Yes.
but also we do our own little test within the likes of TikTok Symphony, where
Mm.
the person is speaking and you see their hands are moving in a very weird and unnatural way, but actually
Mhm.
it's getting a lot better. And I'm
Mhm.
actually finding it a little bit difficult to figure out what is AI and what is real now as well, which
Mhm.
is scary. It is a scary reality.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when I use ChatGPT, I'm like, this could easily be a person. Like, I
Yeah,
would not be able to tell that this wasn't an actual person, which is, it's obviously come on leaps and bounds from when you used to have those kind of chat bots on websites that would just be so frustrating because they wouldn't understand what you needed at all. It's pretty incredible the advancements that have taken place as a result of that. So I think we're in an exciting and also a little bit scary phase where it's like we just genuinely don't know how the landscape's going to be in like 6 months or 12 months. It could be completely different,
yeah,
and there's always new tools coming onto the market as well. So it can be, I think, challenging for everybody in the industry to keep on top of what's the best ones to be looking at.
absolutely. Another thing on our platforms, so like Meta and TikTok and Google now, for example, um, they have this feature where AI can generate different sorts of copy for you.
Hmm.
You can put in a copy and it will give you other suggestions that you can use so that it can have a little bit of variation to play with.
Hmm.
And in for a performance media sense, that is great for when you're wanting to do a bit of testing and you really want to serve the best message to the right person ultimately. So having a few different variations in there is great.
Hmm.
But how does that marry up with, I know you're not a copywriter, but you have copywriters on your team,
Hmm.
on the job that they're doing, because it's kind of weighing up um, that performance side and the results and what is actually working, but also
Hmm.
having to juggle that with the human cost. Like we have copywriters in house. Like, do we still need them?
Hmm.
Absolutely. But how do you juggle that?
Yeah, I know it's definitely a challenge, but what I would say is that, obviously you can use ChatGPT or Claude or whatever tool it is that you like to use to generate a whole bunch of copy. Whether all of it will be good is where the human copywriter comes into play and can obviously cherry pick the best pieces of copy and make sure that they're all factually accurate, because I think that's one thing that AI will do is it will say statements and like it's fact, but it's not actually fact unless you've checked it, and only a human can really do that and make sure that there's no kind of biases in the copy, there's no nothing inappropriate, or there's no, I see American spellings quite often in pieces of work that come through, and I'm just like, it's quite clearly been done using something like ChatGPT, because you've got the kind of longer dashes between things, which is always a bit of a telltale sign. Or if you're talking about branding, ChatGPT always seems to want to mention lighthouses, kind of comparing doing a brand workshop to a lighthouse, I'm not really sure what their
That's an
feeling is.
interesting one.
Yeah, I know. It's just like, what? I have no idea why it kind of correlates those two things. But yeah, I think you still need a human just to make sure that it makes sense and that it's good quality. Because just having a sheer quantity of copy doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be right for the client or right for the campaign. But if we can automate some of these things and find out quicker if things are working, then that's definitely a positive side of using AI. But we still need that human eye.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, do creative teams, off the back of that, do creative teams feel that AI is more of a partner and a tool to be used rather than a threat?
Yeah, I think that's how we have to look at it. I think there's also, obviously, we're looking at creating our own kind of ethics policy within Lane at the moment so that we all know what our stance is and when is it appropriate to use it and when is it best not to. So I think it's about establishing if it's going to be appropriate. So the example I used earlier, when it's pitch work, I think there's arguably a reason for using it at that point because it will speed up the process and it's better. It makes it easier for us to sell in ideas at an early stage, but it doesn't mean that once we actually start working with that client that it would be a case that we would actually use the AI images. Most of the time you wouldn't be able to use that, and also you need to make sure that you can use it commercially as well, which might require a different license. So most of the time I could still see us using or doing a photo shoot. So for example, one of the clients that we've worked on recently, they are a furniture company and we use some AI imagery just to sell in the idea, but we're still going to need to do a photo shoot with their actual products because AI will not be able to replicate their actual what they offer really. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good use case for it. So it's just kind of establishing, is it appropriate and is it going to add to the creative ideation or are we just using it for the sake of using it?
And I think that it ties in very nicely with something we're seeing in real time at the moment. So you're talking about using AI in pitch work, but actually in these tenders now, there is questions on how the agency is going to use AI. This was something that was brought up in our recent team meeting, and one of our colleagues mentioned that is actively being asked of us now as a question, how are we going to use AI? And so that is clearly something that industry is working on, and maybe it's taken a bit of time to reach Scotland, but and perhaps it's already in place in the US, but it's changing with the industry, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can understand why, obviously procurement teams will be very keen to kind of establish if it's a way to kind of save costs. My way of kind of looking at AI is not necessarily about saving costs, it's more, is it going to add to the campaign? Is it going to add to the kind of creative solution that we're coming up with? So it's more like, does it add more rather than does it cut costs? I think that's not such a good way of looking at it because it should be used as a way of enhancing the creative, not to kind of reduce the value of it. Because I still believe that the creative work that an agency like ours creates is very meaningful and very impactful, and having that human side to it. Yes, you might want to use AI to help kind of create more concepts or be able to kind of share your ideas visually at an earlier stage. That's where I see it being an important partner. But yes, I think the word partner is a good way of describing it.
Um, Lovely. So I just want to talk about why it's relevant today. Why are we having this discussion now, Emily? Obviously, consumer behavior is changing very fast.
Hmm.
People are changing the way they're using search, for example. They're no longer searching through different websites to find their answer. They want their answer front and center very quickly. We tend to see that search terms are becoming longer tail. People are asking more in their searches, and also a shift into more shorter form content as well. With all of these changing consumer behaviors, are you finding you're creating differently? Is the type of work that you're getting briefed in a lot different to before?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been using Midjourney probably for about 5 years or so. So it's kind of already been baked into the way that I work to a certain extent. But even before then, I've worked on campaigns using kind of skippable videos for YouTube, for example. So that's where, you'd only have, I think, like 3, 5 seconds, and then somebody has the opportunity to be able to skip. So at that point, there was this talk about the story arc and like how you manage to engage somebody really quickly. So rather than having like a slower story arc where it starts a little bit slower and then it kind of peaks after a little while and then kind of goes to the call to action, we've already had to start thinking, you need to start really like high energy. Something needs to happen within the creative that makes somebody not want to skip, or at least gives them that kind of core message before they do decide to skip. So I feel like that's been something that we've had to bake into the creative process for a number of years. Ever since kind of YouTube started becoming popular, it's been that kind of struggle and challenge to stop people skipping or stop them in the middle of their feeds. So I don't think it's necessarily a new thing, but we maybe just need to figure out ways of being able to ideate a little bit kind of quicker.
Yeah. A phrase I really like using is creating thumb stopping content. Like you
Oh
want
yeah.
the person to stop scrolling, their thumb to stop. Um, so a lot of our modern campaigns that we run on the likes of paid social is something called like their smart campaigns, whether it's Advantage Plus on Meta, Smart Plus on TikTok, or Performance Plus on Pinterest. It's essentially a more simplified and streamlined way of setting up a campaign, but it utilizes AI to serve the right creatives to the right people, so there is less manual targeting involved. But what it does mean is a bigger ask for creative. We need to put in a lot more creatives than we ever had, and ultimately, creative is the new targeting. So depending on who you're trying to speak to, your creative should reflect that. And Emily, I know you've been part of a project within the agency to how we can better align the creative team with their performance media team to create content at scale. So I wondered if you can just talk about that project a little bit and how we are navigating this new way of working to create more content at speed, at scale for our clients to be able to target better, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a really interesting project to be involved with, actually, just to explore a little bit what the tools we already have access to, like what can we do with them. So one of the tools that we use quite a bit at the moment is Figma. So we use that predominantly for doing kind of website design and UI, UX design. But it also, so at this kind of at the start of the year, there was the Figma conference where they launched a whole bunch of new products that they have as part of the Figma tool. And one of those was Figma Buzz, which has been made specifically for social media content and posts. And I did find that that was a very useful way of being able to generate a whole bunch of assets very, very quickly. So the way it works is that you create a template. You then have a spreadsheet that maybe has kind of your headlines, the imagery you want to include, maybe subhead, maybe the call to action copy. And what Figma Buzz can do is it will automate those really quickly. However, what I would say is that actually populating that spreadsheet takes some time, and also finding the right imagery also takes some time. So whilst it can be a very effective way of kind of rolling it out in practice, because we maybe don't get images that are all the same aspect ratio or have imagery where the crop is going to work the same, that's where you still need to spend a bit of manual time either selecting the right images or then manually changing the crop on it afterwards. So it's been interesting to see that that can automate it, but there still is some teething issues where, Figma isn't able to be like, oh, that image is cropping that person's head off, for example. Whereas for a human designer, we're like, yes, that's not right. We need to change that. So It's been interesting exploring that. I would say that there's other tools that we're looking to explore because if we can automate some of this, it's not realistic for our relatively small design team to be rolling out as many assets as quickly as they're needed. So it's definitely still a bit of a kind of learning curve for us, but it's something that we need to explore. And I'm excited to see something that's able to automate. Maybe not even just social, but things like programmatic assets. I don't think any creative gets excited about rolling out, you know, 20 different sizes. Some of them are really, really small. So if some of that is able to be kind of automated and then we just get to oversee it and maybe make changes or approve it, then I think it will make creatives happy in the long run because that's not the sort of stuff that we get really excited about. We like coming up with the original
Yeah.
ideas and coming up with the kind of initial concepts.
Yeah. I think that's fair enough. I think you want to do more of the things you want to do, and maybe you can use AI to do more of the things that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
But I think isn't it a very exciting project, especially for us performance media folk, just because it's a way of exploring how the creative team can use AI to solve a problem that we need creative because of AI. So
Mm.
it's is an interesting double-edged sword almost.
Yeah. Mhm.
Something that you were saying, Emily, about doing all those different display ads, programmatic display ads, and also using storyboarding for pitches. It does
Mhm.
really go back to if listeners have heard our previous episode with Hannah and James talking about how creative teams are using AI. It's
Mhm.
something that the guys at Fiction Tribe do as well. It's clearly something that is seeping into our agency as well, that we do use AI for pitching and for storyboards, but we don't really touch it for real work. And
Mhm.
also utilizing it to, we're going to explore utilizing it for using it for display ads, resizing. Is there
Mhm.
anything else that you're currently using at the agency that you can share some tips for our listeners, or share some insight on how it's gone?
Yeah, I mean, well, we use the Adobe Firefly AI tools quite frequently because they're baked into a lot of the products that we use. So for example, Photoshop, if you're expanding an image, it can generate the background as you expand the images. So that can work really, really effectively rather than having to kind of manually do that yourself. It's not always perfect, and sometimes you need to do a few kind of iterations before you get it right, but that can be a really good tool. And I feel like some of that might be baked into Adobe Express, which is basically their Canva product, which is, I think there is a free account that you can use for that. There's also a free account for Figma, which has lots of kind of AI tools baked into it as well, including Figma Make. So Figma Make will allow you to do a prompt and then it's almost like kind of vibe coding and then it will kind of generate something that has more interactive elements to it. Again, it's not perfect, it's still getting worked on, but I think it's an exciting kind of feature, and because there is that kind of free tier, there's some of that you can explore without having to invest very heavily into it. So I would definitely recommend having a look at that. Runway is one of the tools that I've heard a lot of agencies talk about, and it has some really interesting video capabilities. So again, that's probably one that would be worthwhile exploring. But I think to get some really good outputs from that, you kind of do need to invest a fair amount, nothing too insane, but it obviously you need to decide if that's something that you want to explore and want to kind of invest in. But there's so many other tools coming out, but certainly the ones that I've mentioned so far on this podcast are the ones that I've heard talked most about in the industry. And I'm not saying that they're perfect. There's probably some ethical question marks over some of them. I know that Midjourney recently have had a bit of a lawsuit with Disney, for example. So yeah, there's obviously still some question marks on how some of these models have been trained. So if you can, have a look and try and do your research and find out where certain models have been trained. One of the tools that we have used a little bit of recently is exactly.ai, and it kind of credits itself as an ethical AI platform. And the reason why it calls itself that is because it's had some illustrators create illustrations, and then they've trained models based on their style. And then if somebody uses that model and then wants to use the image commercially, that illustrator will get remunerated for that use case. So I think that's really nice, and it's good to hear of platforms like that being built. And I think that's one where you can kind of use and kind of feel good about yourself, because I don't want illustrators to not have work, because there's some amazing illustrators out there. And yeah, if we can obviously commission them, which we always do at Lane, even if we're using AI to do concept work, when it comes to the final work, we're always going to want to seek out a talented human to actually do that final output. And also it gives you a little bit more reassurance of what the intellectual property details are for
Yeah,
that piece of work.
lovely. I'm going to end on a big question for you.
Okay.
How do you see the industry in 5 years?
Oh my goodness. I feel like whatever I say to this, I'll look back at it in 5 years and be like, you were very wrong. Um, I can definitely see most agencies adopting AI in some shape or form. I would, I feel like when it comes to creative, the kind of AI hype will probably sort of pop, the kind of AI bubble that we're in will probably pop in a couple of years. And it'll become less of the kind of, well, the AI hype will kind of dissipate, I think. And I feel like there might be more of a resurgence of using more human creatives and kind of wanting to have pieces of creative and pieces of design that look like they're handmade, and maybe wanting some of the mistakes that humans will make that are quite charming. Whereas if it's an AI mistake, it can be a bit creepy. So I could definitely see younger designers wanting to adopt maybe more of a kind of handmade style, but then probably using AI on top of that to explore different ways of exploring human creativity. So I think it's really exciting. I've got no idea what we'll see though. It could be, I don't know. I honestly, I would like to see something absolutely wild happening, which I'm sure we will do.
Amazing. Thank you, Emily. So, just to summarize, we talked a bit about the AI in industry now and why it's relevant to us, but also the things that we need to take into consideration, like ethics and the human element to it as well, but also a little bit about how we're using it as a team at Lane. Thank you very much for joining me on this conversation.
No worries. Thanks for having me, Emily.